So we're all here today because after the events of the past year and a half, we finally started to recognize that the extortions that are happening against this community, this wave of violence that's happening across our community, across this entire country, is a national crisis, and that something needs to be done. But when we look at this issue of extortion, when we look at the violence that's happening, it's crucial, and one of the reasons that this town hall needed to be organized by the community is to recognize and put front and center that this isn't a law and order issue, nor is this a regional issue of just impacting community members in Brampton or in Surrey or just in Calgary. This is a national security issue, and the root of this issue is foreign interference and transnational repression. The extortions and the violence we're seeing are a symptom of Indians' coordinated attacks on this country and the Sikh community. ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਰੋਤੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਅਸਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਹ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਲੱਛਣ ਆ। ਪਿੱਛੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਆਰਡਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਤੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਭਾਈ ਪਲਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਆਖਿਆ ਤੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ, ਏਜੰਸੀ ਦੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਦੇ ਮੂੰਹੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਮੰਨੀਆਂ। So the reason we needed to organize this town hall, gathering all of Canada's largest Sikh advocacy organizations and institutions and major Gurdwaras across this entire country, in a series of town halls, starting today, next week, going across to the West Coast as well, is because there's an increasing trust deficit between the community and the government today. Because we know that the root of the violence that's impacting our communities is originating in India, but it's this government's lack of action and the U-turn and this realignment with India that's enabling or failing to stop India's violence in its tracks. So when we look at India's actions, one thing is unequivocally clear, that India is in a category of its own when we talk about foreign interference and transnational repression. China, Russia, Iran, no other country has come to this country, assassinated a citizen, a leader of our community, and targeted dozens of other individuals for assassination, and unleashed a spree, a coordinated a wave of violence across this country that was coordinated from the consulates and embassies itself. India is engaged in electoral interference, it's engaged in disinformation, and one of the most concerning and dangerous forms of foreign interference is this idea of cognitive warfare. So last year, a lot of individuals who followed the findings of the Foreign Interference Commission knew that there was evidence that came from CSIS that India is engaging in cognitive warfare. Cognitive warfare is a form of warfare and a form of aggression that takes neuroscience, digital technologies, and combines them with psychological operations. Not just to spread confusion, but to manipulate public perceptions and community decision-making across the country, within the community and in terms of the government. And CSIS has released and unclassified documents that were released to the Commission that are unequivocally clear that India seeks to use cognitive warfare techniques to promote a pro-India and anti-Sikh, anti-Khalistan narrative in Canada using these techniques. And when Prime Minister Trudeau was questioned at the Foreign Interference Commission last year about this violence, about the nature of this violence and its objectives, as Prabhjot Singh shared, the Prime Minister, under oath, testified before the Commission that it's individuals within the Indian government that are creating violence and unlawfulness in Canada as a way of demonstrating a point that they're trying to make, that there is violence and unlawfulness in Canada. So this is going beyond the threshold of disinformation and psychological operations and trying to spread confusion and panic just through false news. Senior level government officials orchestrated, coordinated, and directed violence across this entire community to create this perception of lawlessness in Canada and to target our community. And when you look at this idea of using criminal gangs and deputized criminals against communities in this manner, this isn't a new phenomenon. This is a matter of policy for the government of India. ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਪਾਬੰਦੀ ਲੱਗ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਕੰਡਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। 80ਵਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 90ਵਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਕੈਟ ਸੀਗੇ, ਆਲਮ ਸੈਨਾ ਹੋਈ, ਹੋਰ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹ ਜਿਹੇ ਟੋਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਰਿੰਦੇ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਏਜੰਸੀਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਹਿੰਸਾ ਵਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਸਟੇਟ ਦੀ ਨੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਇਤਫਾਕ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਇਨਸੀਡੈਂਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। This is a intentional, premeditated, explicit policy decision by the government of India to use criminal gangs to target Sikh activists and dissidents, their family members, and to sow chaos. Human Rights Watch, INSAF, and a number of other human rights organizations have documented the use of these death squads throughout the 80s and 90s, and now it's happening with Lawrence Bishnoi and his gang as well. But the fundamental thing is that these gangs are deputized and directed by the government of India. Canada's Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister appeared before a parliamentary committee and explicitly acknowledged that it's India's Home Affairs Minister. This isn't some rogue officer sitting away and working off the corner of his desk. This is the second most powerful man in India who is coordinating the violence, using information that was collected from the consulates and embassies in Canada across this country. After Bhai Hardeep Singh's assassination, shortly afterwards, Narendra Modi appeared at an election rally and made this comment multiple times, boasting and taunting Canada that Modi's India enters the homes of its enemies and kills them. Ajit Doval, who's India's national security advisor, Natalie Drouin's counterpart, a couple of years ago, he went on the record speaking to a police graduating class at their training academies, who talks about how civil society is the new frontier of warfare. This is a senior official that attended the G7 with Prime Minister Modi, with Prime Minister Carney, shook hands and sat in that room and discussed trade deals. It's individuals who are boasting, celebrating, bragging about carrying out extrajudicial assassinations against our community in this country. And these are the individuals that Canadian government officials are meeting in back rooms during photo ops and shaking hands with. So when we talk about the need for these town halls, it's because of this trust deficit. It's because this violence is being coordinated by India, and this government's lack of action, the lack of public accountability, and the lack of transparency are enabling this violence. So ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਵੀਰ ਭੈਣ ਆਪਣੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਚਰਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਵਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਟੇਬਲਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ, ਕੁਰਸੀਆਂ 'ਤੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਹ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੌਂਪ ਸਕਦੇ। ਇਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਮੰਚ ਆ, this is one of our community gatherings for us to gather, to share our experiences, to share our concerns, and map out our roadmap going forward of how we're going to address this issue. ਜਦੋਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਡਿਸਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ। ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਡਵੋਕੇਸੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲਾਮਬੰਦ ਹੋ ਕੇ, ਸਰਗਰਮ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਡਿਸਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਨੌਜਵਾਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਵੀਰਾਂ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਆਗੂਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਊਟੀ ਟੂ ਵਾਰਨ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਆ, ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੀਆਂ, ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪ ਮੁਹਾਰੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਆਪ ਲਾਮਬੰਦੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਆ। ਅਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨਸ ਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਨਾਕਾਮੀਆਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਕੱਠਿਆਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅੰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੋਢਿਆਂ 'ਤੇ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਜੋ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫਰਮਾਇਆ, ਆਪਣ ਹੱਥੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਆਪ ਹੀ ਕਾਜ ਸਵਾਰੀ ਹੈ। These town halls are the beginning. This series is a process to begin a national dialogue within the community around how we're going to communicate, how we're going to coordinate, and how we're going to hold our elected officials accountable. So ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਕੁ ਬੇਨਤੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰਵਾਨ ਕਰਿਓ। I'm going to hand it over to Simrit now and to our next speaker, and so we can begin today's event. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।